Hi, everybody. So I'm Emily Solomonson. I graduated from CSD in 2016. And in December, I graduated from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill with a degree in environmental studies. So I kind of became a scientist kind of throughout my life without really realizing it. When I was little, I would go out and play at my grandparents' farm. I would go play in the creek and in the lake down at Lake Norman and at Mountain Island Lake and at the creek just behind our house, or even just picking up rocks in my backyard. So I'd always been kind of curious about nature, learning about different backyard birds. So if you look, we have some bird feeders out here, right up there. So we get some yellow finches, some house finches, and the occasional squirrel that our dog scares away. When I was little, I also would go to a lot of different summer camps that were very science-based. So I don't know if any of y'all have been to the Raptor Center, but I went to their nature camps when I was a kid, and then was actually a counselor for a few weeks. For the summer after freshman year at UNC. And then I also participated in the North Carolina Science Festival as a worker when I was working at the planetarium up at UNC. So I learned from a lot of different scientists growing up. Some of my favorites are actually teachers who are at UNC or at CSD still, including Miss Barb, Miss Patterson, Miss Smith, a lot of different ones that I had that really helped to grow my curiosity in the science field in a more traditional way than what I had done as a kid, which was a lot more just going out into the world of curiosity. But that is what a scientist does. It's just not what we think of when you see people in lab coats and lots of machinery and all the data and numbers that go into science. You don't think about the curiosity side of it, of just going out and what it really is going out and exploring. Is throughout my time at CSD, I really was exposed to a lot of different scientific activities. So I remember in first grade in Miss Humphrey's class, we created the salt or vinegar and baking soda volcanoes. And we had a classmate who had a pet snake who brought it in to show us how it sheds its skin. And I actually have a science box that I have some other snake skins and rocks and birds' nests that I've found. Though don't just take birds' nests out of trees. If they're on the ground and look abandoned, that's when you can take them. And still you can leave them so other birds can use it. But don't go looking around in trees because they might be the home already for some other baby birds. Also at CSD and throughout elementary school, we did lots of walks down to the park at the pond where we were able to run around, look at the trees, and even just in the backyard or the playground of CSD, you have lots of trees with acorns. And I remember every year we would go and find all the inchworms and they'd be on everybody's shirts. So even if you just sit and watch the inchworms go, that's still being a scientist. You're making observations, you're looking at the world around you. So there's many different ways that you're learning and observing and doing science in a way that you don't think is necessarily doing science. So since I have been a scientist for, 22 years now, there have been a few different questions that I have answered or just observed and learned from talking with other scientists to other professionals in their field. So when I was younger, I did some explorations in creeks. And one thing that I learned is how you can tell a creek is healthy. So one thing that's really interesting is there are certain insects and other water creatures that are indicators. So they help you see if a creek or water body is healthy or not. So for example, if you go out and you take a sample, like a little bucket of some water, and you look in there and you see some tadpoles and some mosquito larvae and some dragonfly larvae, that's pretty standard water quality. It's not going to be super great, not super bad. But there are some insects where if you find those, it shows that the water quality is really, really good, because those insects will only lay their eggs, so then you'd only see the larva of that insect in water that's really good quality. And then on the other side of the spectrum, there are some insects that you only see if the water quality is really bad, because they can kind of live wherever. And so that's one thing that's really cool, is you can look at what is present and what should be there and what is actually there to determine the health of a water system. Another really cool thing is 3 years ago now, I did a semester studying abroad in Ecuador. So that's in South America, right along the equator, which is how it got its name. And Ecuador also owns, it has part of their country, kind of like how we have Hawaii, they have the Galapagos Islands. So I got to spend 3 months studying on the Galapagos Islands during my time as an undergraduate student at UNC. So one of the things I learned there is that there are ways that you can tell sea turtles apart. So, there's different species of sea turtle. So you can tell a green sea turtle from a hawksbill sea turtle by what they look like. But how do you tell the difference between individual sea turtles? Like, how would a sea turtle see the difference between different people? Okay, you look at their hair, you look at their eyes. Like, there's different things that you can look at a person and say, okay, like like their face is different from individual to individual, even between siblings. My brother and I look a whole lot alike, but we're definitely different enough that you can tell we're individuals. So one thing that's really interesting with sea turtles is the way you can tell them apart is on their face. They have these different scales, and each one has their individual pattern of scales. So what scientists on the Galapagos are doing is taking pictures of these sea turtles to see if they return to the same beach each year or every other year, to see what their sea turtle population is like, returning and not returning, to determine their actual population sizes and try to get funding for conservation efforts. So lastly, one of the other questions is, why do volcanoes erupt? So a few years ago, my family and I took a trip to Guatemala, which is in Central America. And they, as well as some other Spanish-speaking countries like Ecuador, have volcanoes. So volcanoes are really cool, but they can also be really dangerous. So one question is, why do they erupt? Which is when they can be relatively dangerous. And that's because if you look at a cut across of the earth, you see that there's the core, and then you have magma. And so what happens is magma will rise up to the mantle, which is like the crust, or the mantle and the crust. And then there's so much pressure because it's really, really hot on the core of the earth that it then has to push through to escape. If you think about it, it's like when you're really, really angry and you just can't hold it in anymore and you just like burst open. That's kind of what happens. It's just all of that energy has to go somewhere. And so that's what makes a volcano erupt. So one thing that's really cool is we got to go hiking on an active volcano. So this volcano was not currently erupting. However, it still had some of that energy within it. So there was still lava out flowing in rivers, and the ground was really warm. Our friend's shoes actually melted off, so her dad had to pick her up so that she wouldn't burn her feet. But one thing that was really important for us is to be able to speak Spanish, because people there speak Spanish as their primary language. So for us to be able to communicate well and get answers to the questions that we had to speak Spanish. So one thing is, you can look at what the questions are for a scientist who asks questions in Spanish. So for who, it's quién. What is qué. Where is dónde. When is cuándo. Why is por qué. And how, cómo. So for example, to say, why do volcanoes erupt? it would be, so for why volcanoes erupt would be ¿por qué entran en erupción los volcanes? So los volcanes is volcanoes, ¿por qué is why, and then entran a erupción is erupt. So Spanish is really helpful when you want to do research in places that speak Spanish, and let's say you want to learn about places that speak another language. Then being able to ask and get your questions answered in the language that is primarily used in that place will get you a lot farther than trying to translate back and forth, because some things don't translate clearly between languages. So that's what I have for now. We have a few more questions for you along the PowerPoint, but hope y'all are doing well, and it's great to meet you.